I guess it's time to fool around with the lathe again here. Bought it 2 years ago when I knew the tariffs and stuff were going to go on this stuff, and we let it sit in the crate in here for most of that year, or most of that season. Then last fall we took it out of the crate and set it up, and then I just covered it up and stuck it over here out of the way and covered it up. And I took it out of the crate so I could get it out of the way because it was right here in front of the door, and I needed to get access into the hangar here to get plane parts in and out and stuff. I'm going to bring the airplane down here to put it together, so I need to get this out of the way, and I take this up in the basement and set it up there. I haven't done anything with it since we set it up because it's just a flimsy wood floor in here, and I didn't really want to try to set it up and use it on this bouncy wood floor. And once we get it up into the basement, I've got a good solid cement floor up there, and I can put it in a place where it'll be for a little while and get it set up and use it. I've got a couple projects I want to do with it. But while it's down here, this is a good spot to clean it up. I'm using paint thinner to wash it down with to get all the old cosmoline or grease, bilge oil, whatever it is that they put on that for preservative. I didn't try taking it off before because it's been sitting down here in the hangar through the winter and stuff. We had a little heat thing in there to try to keep the humidity down a little bit under a tarp and stuff, and with that bilge oil on it, it did pretty good. Get up there in the basement and it's kind of closed in, and fumes go upstairs and stuff like that. There's not real good ventilation in there, so I can get that cleaned up down here where we got lots of fresh air and lots of ventilation, and then figure out how we're going to move it. I kind of got to get the airplane and all that stuff out of the basement before I can put this in there, and I have to get this out of here before I can put the airplane in here. So I've been cleaning it up a little bit. I put some paint thinner in a spray bottle and sprayed the whole thing down, and I started wiping it down. I got the headstock pretty well wiped down, and I got the bed ways wiped down. This oil and stuff is all through here, and I kind of want to wash it all down, get it all cleaned up. So I've taken the tool post off, I've taken the compound off. I've seen a lot of posts and stuff where guys found a lot of dirt and grunge and all that stuff, and so far it's not been disappointed with that. There is that old grease and oil and stuff down in all of this that I've opened up so far. So I think I'll take it apart and wash this carriage here, the whatever that's called, the gear train in there. That's got oil in it. There's no oil in the headstock, so I have to put oil in it. I want to wash it out first. Anyway, that's what we're doing here now, and it's taking longer than I wanted to because I can barely get around. I'm all gimped up here with my back here right now, so we'll try to get this cleaned up and then figure out how we're going to get it up there to the basement. I'm getting this thing fairly well disassembled. I took the tailstock off, I took the compound off, and then the cross slide. Then I've been taking the carriage apart here. It's kind of a pain to get it off. Far side over there has some gibs on it. They're clamped on from underneath. On the front side over here just has these little brackets on there, and they're back behind this gearbox there on that carriage, and they're a pain in the butt to get to. And then they throw a monkey wrench in there because the first hole on this one gib here uses a 13 millimeter wrench on it, and the rest of them use a 14 millimeter. So it kind of throws you for a loop there when you go to try to take it out, and you can't get the wrench to fit on it. But then there's not enough room to get a wrench in there on those inner bolts. I finally wound up taking part of the rack off here. I'm going to take that rack off anyway, clean up underneath it, and getting that off helped get around back there. And then this, everything was kind of a pain to come out because there are pins, roll pins in here for locating pins on this carriage top that go down into this gearbox, and then this gear sticks up into this carriage up here, the upper portion of it. So you got to drop it down a long ways to get it to come out of there. Well, the half nuts stop it from coming out, so I wound up having to take the half nuts out. I thought maybe I could take this handle off of here and get this to slide out through there, but that didn't work. These half nuts are in here in a dovetail, a slot, and then they have, I guess you'd call it a gib or something in there that's bolted in there. So it's a filler piece anyway. This is a half dovetail on one side and a half dovetail on the other side, and then it's got, well, this is the finished part of the dovetail that fits down in there. So anyway, there's two little bolts there that you got to take out. Once those come out, that comes out, and that's got to slide up out of the way, and then the half nuts will come out of there, and then this thing will come off. Well, I'm glad I took this off because this is dirty. There's a worm gear down here for the travel and that's packed with grease, but none of it was into the worm gear itself. It was all just pushed away. We'll get some new grease on that. Now, for the most part, I'm not too disappointed in this thing. Everything was working smooth on it. Getting preservative grease moved around there, got stuff in all over, but there was preservative grease like here and under here. That's one of the reasons I wanted to take it apart and make sure and get all that crap off there. In here, once I turned this top of this carriage over, it's cruddy in here, and I've heard guys complain and say, oh, it was casting sand and stuff like that in there in their boxes. They didn't clean it out. But this is not casting sand, because this inside was painted after it came out of the mold, of course, and all this stuff is on top of it. I'm pretty sure what it is shavings. I think they drilled out all these holes and stuff like that after they got everything all assembled. They put everything together and then drilled out all these holes and everything, and then the thing's assembled. It doesn't get taken apart to get cleaned out. So look in this gearbox here. A lot of these gears are held onto the shafts with roll pins, and it looks to me like those were drilled in place. They was all put together and those were drilled out in place, so all those shavings and stuff just go down in there and get in the machine and just get left in there because they don't get cleaned up. And looking at this definitely tells me that I'm going to open up the main headstock gearbox there and look in that and wash it out before I put oil in it. Hear a lot of complaints about these Chinese machines and should buy American, and how they're just a bunch of crap. They're just a kit. You got to take them apart, put them together and stuff and get them going. And cleaning it up, taking it apart and cleaning it up is a good idea, but if I buy a Smith & Wesson Model 29, I take it all apart, clean it up, and then polish up surfaces on it and make it shoot a lot better. Same thing with a Colt 911 or a Ruger Single 6. I got to take them apart, clean them up and polish them up and stuff to make them work good before I use them, and I don't see where this is that much different. And one of the things I did see on YouTube, one of the guys did report, was that he had a lot of noise and a vibration in his machine, and when he got to investigating it, he found that this pulley was loose and wobbling on the shaft. So I wanted to check that out beforehand here before we got too far. And I think he said his didn't have a set screw in it or a key in it or something like that. So I got this apart, and looking at it, it does have a key in it, and it has a set screw, but the set screw, the key is in here in the front, and the set screw is all the way here in the back, and it's on the opposite side from the key, instead of going through the keyway and pushing the key down in tight. So that may be something to fix before we get going too far on here. Sandhill cranes migrating south. Been going over for a few days now. I took this gearbox here and dumped the oil out of it. Anyway, I flushed it down with paint thinner, and I stuck this magnet, pickup magnet, down in there into the bottom, into this is just one corner, and got that kind of metal filings out of it there. Yeah, there's a different corner. So those are just metal filings. I think, pretty sure what they are is just from putting this thing together and then drilling out all of these shafts, and gears are drilled out for roll pins, and I would bet hard money that that's why they have all those shavings in there, is they just put those in there, and most of them were done right here, or there was no cleanup after the fact. Anyway, here's the bottom of the Carriage gearbox, and this is the plug, the drain plug. It's even got paint spattered on it on the inside of it. Well, I put a little magnet on there. I wanted to be real anal. I could have drilled that and epoxied it in there, I guess, but the magnet will stick there just fine. That should gather up all of the stray metal shavings and stuff in there as this thing operates and take them out of suspension. I'll put a little bit of Gookumpucky on there, thread sealant on there, and put that thing back in there. Yeah, it wants to pull. Uh-oh. The magnet wants to pull right to the side of that housing. Okay, I got it started there. That's pretty good for now. A lot better than it was. I want to take this up, put it in the basement, get it out of the way for now, and work on the main box there on the rest of the lathe body on the headstock. So I took the top off of this headstock so I could get in there and make sure that was all cleaned out. And then looking down in this case here, in these gears, it looked pretty good. All the gears looked pretty good. They were pretty clean and shiny. Kind of worried about a little bit because I'd heard some horror stories about these gears being on here loose and stuff and sliding around free and whatnot, so I wanted to check that out. And those all look pretty good. They're all on there tight. I don't see any of the lock rings missing or anything like that. There's snap rings on these to hold them on these shafts, and then there's keys full length of these shafts for them to slide back and forth on. And all that seems like it's good. I don't see any burrs, anything like that on any of the teeth. These are dovetail, or not dovetail, they're chamfered on one side where they engage in these other teeth. You don't see much going on there. Everything looked good. The top of the case here in this groove around here, which I suppose is an oil groove, it's got drain holes going down in here, so I suppose the oil would splash up into here and then drain down into these bearings. There's weep holes in here in several spots for that. This was grungy, dirty, and it had a few shavings and stuff in it. And then this whole case in here was dirty, grungy looking, at brown stuff on, whatever that coating is, it's on there. But I went ahead and washed everything out with the paint thinner, able to get my hand down here at places. Other places I could take a screwdriver and get rags in there and wipe everything out. And it looked like it was pretty good shape. I didn't really see any shavings in there like I did on that Carriage gear case. But the paint thinner really didn't do much to clean this off. It got it cleaned up, but it wasn't really cutting into this grease, whatever that stuff is on there. I had a little bit of brake cleaner left over from doing my brakes, work on my truck last fall. Well, I sprayed that in there a little bit, and it did wash a little bit more of that stuff off of there. But I don't like using brake cleaner for solvent very much. I did use my favorite solvent, and that after the brake cleaner, and that starting fluid, and that cut that stuff and washed it down off there, cut it pretty good. And the starting fluid is down in there in that cavity, in that hold, and it started softening that stuff up. So I started going through that with the magnet just to see if I could get anything out of there. And as I'm rubbing that magnet around in there, that's loosening that tar, whatever that stuff is in there, up. And this shavings, you can see those real fine metal shavings coming out of whatever that stuff is in there. It was all embedded in it, and nothing had come out before, but the starting fluid has softened that stuff up to where I'm starting to get that shavings out of there. Now, I'm not getting any sand. I don't see any sand in there, casting sand or anything like that, like I've heard other people complain about being in there. It's clean for that, but these shavings are in there, and they're embedded in that. I can see it looks like gold flecks down there now on the bottom. They were embedded in that grunge that was in there. There's an oil drain hole right here in this case for this main gear case. Just got a internally hex pipe plug that goes in there, come out of there. But typical of all of these things anymore, they just put a plug in there and a hole in there, and if you go to drain the oil out of that, it's just going to run right down all over everything and make a mess. So I went and got a street elbow. Let's see if I can get that in there. I don't know whether that's going to fit in there or not. I might have to take that gear off there to get this street elbow in there. But I got the street elbow so that it'll go in far enough that it won't interfere with that gear. That'll get the oil drain out far enough where we can put a funnel underneath it or something. Well, I got that street elbow on there. it gets oil when it drains out away from the side here, so it doesn't dribble down there. I can put a funnel or something underneath it. Got it angled out over this way so it comes out to the side. I had to take this bull gear off of here, this main gear off of here, to get clearance in there for that nipple to turn into that hole, but it'll be fine. It's plenty of clearance once I get that. Once I got that nipple in there, that nipple's not going to interfere with that gear any at all. Well, I've got this headstock spindle gear case pretty well cleaned out. I want to close this up. I've taken a lot of other parts off of here, the case over the gear train and all this other stuff, and I'm going to leave it off because that lightens this machine up a lot for moving it now. But I'm going to put this cover back over this headstock. Before I put the top on it, I'm going to go ahead and put the oil in it. Now I've got Phillips 66 Megaflow AW32 hydraulic oil. That's not exactly what they call for, and I did some research on it and stuff to see what they're supposed to put in it, and this is not exactly it, but I don't have much choice. This is all they had at the oil supplier here, the fuel supply depot here, and this is the only one we've got anywhere around here. This will work probably just fine. Like I said, it's temporary in here anyway. There's a break-in period on this thing where you run it for a while and then change the oil, dump it out, and put some more in it. So when I do that, I'll see if I can't round up some oil that's the correct stuff for put in here. Now it only takes 3.5 quarts according to the book, but you can only buy this stuff in the 5-gallon cans. You can't get it in a gallon container. So I've seen guys say that they use whatever in here for break-in period and then drain it, flush it out with paint thinner or solvent of some kind, and then put the good stuff in it. But I don't see how that works. This drain is probably a 1/4 inch above the bottom of the sump in here, above the bottom of this crankcase or this case. So it's always going to leave quite a bit of residual oil in there. Well, if a person drained the oil out of it and then flushed it out with a solvent of some kind and washed it out, you think you're doing a good job, but the solvent and all the stuff never comes out of it. I even tipped this thing up and put a wedge underneath the back, so the back is higher than the front, and still none of the solvent that was in there came out until I started pushing on it with a rag to get it out. The only way to really get that stuff cleaned out of there is to go ahead and pop the top off of this again and wash it out like I did this time to get it clean. Well, I got everything pretty much cleaned up. I got the rack, I took it off and washed down behind it real good on the base there on the lathe, and then I cleaned the rack up itself, washed it down. Did the same thing with the lead screw. I washed it down and wiped it down as good as I could with the rags. I said I was gonna coat that with Bow Shield, and I got the Bow Shield out, and I don't know what the hell it is with these new cans anymore, but you get 1 or 2 squirts out of them and then they're done. I think I've got 3 or 4 of these cans of Bow Shield there, and not one of them work. This one's a brand new can, and I got, I think, 2 squirts out of it, and it quit. And I can't get it to work. Sometimes the paint and stuff, it'll quit and it sits a little bit, and the paint will get dried out in the nozzle, and I soak those in lacquer thinner and get them to work. But it seems like these new cans, it doesn't matter what you do, and when they quit working, they quit working. I guess it says on here, developed by Boeing Company, waterproof, meets all USA and state environmental regulations. So I guess as long as it stays in the can, it's not environmentally hazardous. I dug out this other stuff, corrosion block. Several years ago, the product come out called ACF 50. It was a real light oil like that you spray in airplanes, and it's supposed to creep its way underneath the corrosion and form a bond over it and seal things up and stuff like that. And we used that on the airplanes, and then they come out with this stuff here, which is corrosion block. It's the same thing, but it's heavier bodied, and it's meant for marine. And I've still got a couple cans of that, and believe it or not, those still spray, even though that can's almost empty. So there's one more thing I have to do now before I move it. I screwed up when I put that together, and I put the stand on wrong side up. And there was no directions for the stand to how to put it on this table, and I assumed that this under plate here, this table, if I put it up like this groove along here, the oil and things like that, the cutting oil and whatnot, fluid would come down off of that tray and drip down into this groove and run around, and I could drill a hole in it, put a tube in it for a catchment for recycling it. But these corners are not watertight on there, and I noticed that all that fluid was going down in that tray and leaking out the corner over there. And looking at some videos and stuff like that on YouTube and some other pictures and stuff, I'd see that I had the tray on upside down. So I'm going to take the lathe loose from the stand and clean that tray up and clean everything up underneath there, and then flip that over and put it back together. I got that lathe hoisted up in the air and got it off of the stand. Then I got the stand, or the tray there, separated from the stand. The manual says to seal between that tray and the stand and the lathe with some RTV to prevent any coolant, threading compound, or anything from leaking through those holes where the lathe bolts down to the stand. So I'd put a pretty generous supply of RTV on there, and so that was a mess to clean up. I took a deburring tool and went around the holes in the tray, and then I took a chamfering tool or a countersink and deburred those holes and put a little chamfer on them in the cast iron in these stands. And I got the tray pretty well cleaned up now, and I'll get that lathe bottom cleaned up and then we can put it back together. I got the lathe mounted up onto the stand again. Kind of a pain getting those bolt holes lined up, especially when you buy yourself, but we got it lined up. When I put that on originally, those mounting holes were full of whatever the body putty, whatever it is that they use to fill in all of the irregularities in this lathe. They've got it all smoothed out. Of course, it's not that way naturally. It's got body putty in it and then paint, and those holes through the feed on it were kind of filled up with that, or gobbed up with that. So the first time I put it together, I just kind of shoved the bolts down through that stuff and lined everything up with that and left that in there. But I don't know whether that's what caused the bolts to rust or what, but the heads or the bolts, the shanks of it that go through the lathe feet had rust on, corrosion on some of them. So I cleaned those all up, and then I put some peralkatone, Cosmoline, on those bolts and the washers when I put them back in. Hopefully I'll have it up in the basement in dry area, but there's a possibility that it could be in an unheated area, and where it gets cold and then gets condensation on it, then you get rust on it. Anyway, I try to take those precautions on some of the places there, and that's a place that won't get any treatment or anything to it. You won't be able to see it or anything else unless you take the lathe apart again. So that is done. So now I'll hoist that back up in the air, and I've got the pallet that this lathe came strapped to. It doesn't have facilities underneath it for the forks to go under, but I do have another pallet there that I set that pallet on, and then I can get under it with the forks and pick that up, and then I can take it up to the basement and figure out what to do with it up there.